They never wrote about him in school textbooks. He was never shown in parades or movies. And yet, it was he who decided the outcome of battles. A machine so feared that even the Germans gave it a name, Stalin's sledgehammer. Behind this weapon lie stories that still divide historians. Why did it appear long before the war, yet take years to reach the front? Why was it hidden from the public as if it were not a cannon, but a secret project that could change the course of war itself? And why did soldiers call it not just a gun, but a weapon of vengeance? Some documents claimed that concrete fortifications simply vanished after a single shot. Witnesses said that in certain sectors, the enemy's defenses turned into scorched earth. But the most intriguing part, who needed to hide the true story of how this machine was born? They say strange things happened at one of the plants where these giants were assembled. Workers spoke of mysterious night tests, of blueprints that disappeared from archives, of orders coming from above that no one dared to question. Some engineers simply vanished from the system. Stay until the end of this video, and you'll learn how a gun forged in the workshops near Leningrad became a symbol of fear, strength, and retribution. Yes, Stalin really did have his own sledgehammer, not as a metaphor, but a real one, weighing dozens of tons, a force so powerful the earth itself trembled with every strike. It wasn't something you could hold in your hands, but its impact could be felt miles away. Its roar was unlike anything else. When the enemy heard that sound, they knew no shelter could save them. People spoke of Stalin's sledgehammer in whispers as if it were alive, capable of crushing everything in its path. Today, the phrase might make you smile, but back then it was spoken with awe. German soldiers, when they first faced it, wrote in their reports, "Unknown heavy gun, striking with unbelievable power." They didn't yet know it was the Soviet B-4 howitzer, one of the most powerful artillery weapons of its time. And its story began long before the war. In the mid-1920s, Soviet engineers started dreaming of a new kind of artillery, one that could reach the enemy where ordinary guns were useless. The country was still recovering from civil war, industry was rebuilding, and designers envisioned giants that could break through concrete and steel. The idea of the future sledgehammer was born not on the battlefield, but in design bureaus, where drafts were drawn by hand and every millimeter of the barrel was debated for hours.
By 1928, several designs lay on the engineers' tables. Each had its strengths and countless flaws. They discussed range, barrel durability, caliber, shell weight. An idea on paper is one thing. Turning it into a weapon takes years. Hundreds of engineers, dozens of testing grounds, thousands of tiny adjustments, all for the sake of one perfect shot. Testing lasted nearly 3 years. Factory stands thundered as pressure inside barrels was measured. In laboratories, grains of powder were weighed with surgical precision. One mistake, and the gun could explode. But those who worked on the B-4 knew, without precision, there's no survival. In 1931, the first prototype finally left the Bolshevik plant in Leningrad. No one yet knew that this gun would become a legend. Field trials began, hundreds of shots, endless fine-tuning. Only after 2 years of work did it earn the right to be called a combat weapon. Thus was born the B-4, massive, slow, but unshakably reliable. Each shell weighed nearly 100 kilograms, and every shot felt like an earthquake. Its first baptism of fire came not in World War II, but in the snow-covered fields of Finland. The Winter War, freezing temperatures, heavy machinery, and deep snow. On the maps, the Mannerheim Line, a chain of fortresses thought to be unbreakable. But when the B-4 roared, even concrete began to crumble. Its shells tore chunks from walls, destroyed bunkers, and turned machine gun nests upside down. Finnish soldiers gave it a name, Stalin's sledgehammer. Not to flatter the enemy, but because each hit felt like a giant hammer striking the earth. To Soviet troops, it was the sculptor, because after its volleys, nothing remained of the enemy's defense but shapeless ruins. The B-4's power wasn't just in its fire. It was unique because it ran on tracks. Where ordinary guns needed flat ground or concrete pads, the sledgehammer could position itself on sand, mud, or soft soil. It didn't need a platform. It could fire from anywhere. That mobility gave Soviet gunners a freedom their enemies lacked. But even giants have weaknesses. The tracked chassis gave it cross-country ability, but reduced speed over long marches. Later, engineers replaced the tracks with wheels to improve movement. Yet back then, none of that mattered. What mattered was that the B-4 could hit any target. Its range reached 18 kilometers, later extended to 20 after upgrades, a staggering distance for its time.
With such a weapon, it seemed the Germans would never break Soviet defenses. But history had other plans. Summer 1941, disaster. Lightning-fast offensives, chaos, lost communications, retreat. Columns of vehicles left behind burned cities and abandoned heavy guns. The B-4, massive and slow, couldn't always escape in time. In the first months alone, over 70 were lost. Some fell into German hands almost intact. The enemy quickly realized what they had captured and turned the B-4s against their creators. The irony of war. Soviet-born giants now firing at Soviet lines. But not for long. Once the front stabilized and factories resumed work, the sledgehammers returned. By 1942, they were back in battle. By then, Soviet gunners knew their machine well, its quirks and strengths. Preparing it to fire took time, but the result was worth every second. When the crew opened fire, everything around seemed to freeze. Smoke rolled along the ground. Moments later, a distant echo. A concrete wall, once deemed unbreakable, collapsing. The B-4 earned respect on the front. Soldiers admired it and feared it too. Not out of danger, but responsibility. One mistake in calculations could be fatal. Each shell weighed nearly 100 kilos. Commanders used to say, "The sledgehammer has a character. Treat it right, and it obeys. Rush it, and it resists." When the war reached its peak, the fate of the entire nation hung in the balance. The Battle of Kursk was the turning point of history. We're told about T-34 tanks, armored clashes, smoke and fire. But few know that Stalin's sledgehammer played a decisive role. The Germans sent their heavy Tigers and Ferdinands, monstrous machines that few weapons could stop. But the B-4 could meet them head-on. Its elevation angle allowed indirect fire, but sometimes gunners shot almost point-blank. Official reports confirm it. When a 100-kilogram shell struck a tank, nothing remained but twisted metal and silence.
Even when it didn't pierce armor, the sheer shockwave shattered engines, tore off turrets, and left tanks frozen in place. At Kursk, the B-4 proved itself, a true weapon of victory.
From then on, it moved with the army, from city sieges to fort assaults across Europe. In Berlin, its thunder echoed through the streets, tearing down the last strongholds of the enemy. Every shot brought the country one step closer to peace. When the war ended, the sledgehammer stayed. It wasn't scrapped or forgotten. It served on, upgraded, modernized, fitted with new sights and mechanisms. For young artillerymen, it became more than a weapon. It was a teacher, a symbol of endurance and legacy. Over time, fewer remained, but the respect for it never faded. At parades, the B-4 stood as a monument to Soviet engineering and resilience. Veterans recalled the moment after each shot, the deafening echo, the trembling ground, and the small smile that followed. The smile of men who knew their weapon had done its job. Stalin's sledgehammer outlived the era it was born into. It remains a part of history, a reminder of a time when steel and human will were equal in strength. Its power carried not just technology, but the spirit of those who built it in years of hunger and hardship. Today you can only see it in museums, yet standing beside it you still feel something, as if the air remembers, as if the barrel could awaken again, ready to obey its final command. The story of Stalin's sledgehammer is the story of a nation that forged not just weapons, but destiny. A story of engineers, soldiers, factories, and front lines. A story where every effort, every bolt, every shot had meaning. It reminds us that true strength is born not from the urge to destroy, but from the need to protect. And when you hear that heavy metallic phrase, Stalin's sledgehammer, remember, behind it stands more than a machine. Behind it stands an era when science and steel united for one purpose, to make sure no one would ever again dare to test the force of that strike.